Hey everybody, forgive my messy kitchen and house in general. I'm just coming in to say that I filmed this video. I was so excited about it. It took me like 40 hours to edit this video, y'all, like a long time. And then I couldn't get it to export. Like nothing. I talked to two people with Apple and stuff. I read articles, I listened to YouTube videos, I tried everything. Everybody told me it's been 6 weeks now that I've been trying to export the following video that you're about to see. So what I ended up doing was just doing a screen recording. And so the quality is horrible and the audio is horrible, but I just was like, I just have to get this out because it's just driving me nuts. And now I really want to film part 4, and I've already spent 2 months on just this one video. So what you're about to see was literally like 80 hours of work. Free work, by the way. Anyway, okay, let me stop talking, and without further ado, here's the coveted part 3.
And I just like didn't have any emotional or mental energy to give to labor because I was like, I don't even know who I'm married to. What's good, YouTube fam? It's Grace Sandra back for part 3 of my story of surviving pretty severe verbal and narcissistic abuse. In part 1, I talked about the love bombing phase. In part 2, I talked about the devaluation phase. And in part 3, I'm going to be talking about the full-on verbally abuse. You're going to see 2 different versions of me today. And the reason why is because I started this video at the end of phase 2. And I wanted to come back and flesh some things out. Before I start phase 3 of the abuse phase, I wanted to share a few things that I forgot in the devaluation phase. The more examples I can give, I realize the more helpful it is. One of the things that has been very difficult for me in realizing that I was narcissistically abused is the fact that everything is so subtle for such a long time that it's very, very, very difficult to realize that you're being narcissistically abused. If you watched the last video, I talked about how from the fall, from the time we got married, August 22nd, until the end of that year in 2015, he was very slowly and methodically devaluing me. I mentioned how in part 2, how I asked him at some point why he didn't want to have sex with me anymore, and it blew up into a really big fight. He said the more I brought it up, the more he was not going to have sex with me, which I felt so pummeled about. I'm looking at my phone because I used to journal a lot into my phone, into like a note app. In an abuse scenario, when an abuser starts devaluing you, you start feeling confused all the time. If you're in a relationship where you're starting to feel confused a lot, one of the things that I brought up in my last video was about how when I asked him if he was trying to find a job to move in with me, he blew up at me and told me I was not allowed to ask about it and that he was just freaking angry about it. I started to keep notes because I felt confused so often. So one of the things that I wrote is, what are the messages he's sending me with actions? Ironically enough, my ex used to always say to me, it's not a person's words that are important, it's their actions. Because I used to always say like, hey, will you tell me you miss me or tell me you love me more often? And he would be like, it's not a person's words, it's their actions. I felt like he said that to me as a way to kind of put me off, like, stop trying to get me to say things like I love you or I miss you. Just watch my actions. But his actions were not telling me that either. So I started writing in my notepad the messages his actions were sending me. So I kept the notepad in an Evernote app. One of the things that I wrote back then was, I'm not allowed to bring up you moving here. The message is that he doesn't really want to be here. He doesn't ever communicate with me how badly he wants to live with me like I do. He never communicates with me how much he misses me. The message is he doesn't really want to be here. We just got married. We were trying for a baby. I was so deeply in love with him. I just wanted to like suck up into him. I was a codependent. I acknowledge that. I didn't realize I was codependent. I didn't realize how codependent I was on him at the time. But there was a point where he told me he wasn't going to be affectionate with me anymore. I just was like, wait, what? Why? Why wouldn't you be affectionate with me? And I'm a person, my love language, one of the 5 love languages, touch is one of my love languages. I love giving physical touch, sexual and non-sexual. I love hugging my kids. I love when I'm in a relationship being touched and being sexually and non-sexually touched. It's a way that I feel very, very loved. I asked him why, and he said, because
it's not me. That was something you brought out of me in the beginning, but I'm kind of done with that now.
This was just a few months into our marriage, and I was just like, I was so sad. I was so disappointed. It led to, again, cognitive dissonance. We just got married a few months ago, so now you don't want to have sex with me. I'm not allowed to ask about it, ever. But we're trying to get pregnant, but you also don't ever want to be affectionate with me. It just was so sad. And then he was amping up all of this antagonistic behavior about black women and really very solidly bullying behavior online. And I was very, very confused. By the time we got to Christmas that year, the message that I felt that he was sending was that he was not attracted to me and that I started to feel like something was wrong with me. That was the beginning of me really losing a lot of my self-esteem. I've been a pretty confident person my whole life. I've never really had issues with men being attracted to me or getting the attention of a man that I wanted to get their attention. I pretty much have always felt quote unquote pretty my whole life and desirable. And it was the first time in my life where I felt like my husband, not only does he not desire me, I feel like something's wrong with me. But it was a little bit more maddening because he wouldn't tell me what was wrong with me. Like, yeah, it was just hard. It's one of those times where I really thought, I feel really tricked. I feel really deceived. Did I just marry a con artist? The sad thing about the devaluation phase is when you realize that the person who they presented themselves to be is so different. The energy is so different. I married someone based off the energy that I was getting in those first 8 months. And now this. Like,
I refuse to compliment you because that's not who I am anymore.
I do remember feeling really, really tricked. So when I asked him for this poem, I finally said, will you just write it for me for Christmas? And I really was hoping like there would be something in there that would say something like, you know, I'm sorry I haven't moved in yet. I'm sorry I haven't done a better job at trying to find a job. I still love you. I still need you. That didn't happen. By the end of the year, so by the end of, that was 2015, I definitely felt like he does not care what I think, what I need, if I'm hurt, if I need to talk. There is nothing that he cares about my existence at all, and that's through his actions. And if I bring it up, I will very likely be belittled. Eventually in January or February or so, I decided to pursue a conversation with him about his behavior on Twitter. I am not exaggerating when I say that it was extremely and extraordinarily troubling, bullying, obnoxious, and terrible. It was terrible. He was also sharing links to YouTube videos that were about anti-women, about women being snakes and liars and cheaters. Literally any problem that the black community has, it was videos and articles about how it's black women's fault. At that point, I felt something I can't quite explain. It felt like a dig at my humanity in a way I can't really explain, because later on, I read a book about verbal abuse. One of the things that is very common with verbal abusers, they will become contrarian to almost everything that you are and believe in. That is a function of verbal abuse. It's also a function of narcissistic abuse, but even if someone's not a narcissist but they verbally abuse you, they will likely become contrarian. What that looks like is if I say, oh, the sky looks really blue today, he would say something like, it's not really all that blue. I mean, it's kind of like turquoise. Like, are you dumb? It's turquoise. It's that kind of contrariness that's not just disagreeing with someone, it's disagreeing plus adding insult, plus taking the power of that moment, plus insulting your intelligence perhaps. And it is incredibly exasperating. That's just a small example. In verbally abusive scenarios, oftentimes that will get blown out to bigger aspects of your life. So I didn't know this at the time, but he literally started targeting every area of my life where I felt some security. The first thing that I felt some security in was in my sexuality. I'd never ever in my life had a hard time getting someone to have sex with me if I wanted them to. And he took that down quickly. Like, oh, you think that you can have sex with me whenever you want to? No, baby girl, no. That's done. I felt like I was pretty. He completely stopped complimenting me, took that down right away. So within 4 months, I wasn't getting none hardly, except for just to try for the baby. At that point, he was treating it like it was so difficult that he had to get his dick hard once a week so he could sleep with his wife. He refused to compliment me, so he took down those two things, which were significant parts of my identity. Yes, I know that's not exactly healthy, but at that point they were. And so I felt a little lost. Like, I can't get my own husband to have sex with me or even enjoy having sex with me, and he doesn't think I'm pretty anymore. Who the fuck am I? Kind of thing. It did really make me feel very lost. What I had left was my strong view and my long-term advocacy for black women, that I decided when I was 16 years old that I was going to always be an advocate for black American women, that I was always going to be someone who spoke out for the vulnerable, whoever that is, but black women are often vulnerable. He started taking that down online and on Twitter without telling me that he had had a major worldview change, without a discussion, without asking me without telling me, without acknowledging how much that would hurt, for him to start taking down my core identity as a woman and as a black woman, and in such a cruel way. So he's posting videos and articles about black women and how literally anything that's wrong in the black community at all can be traced back to black women. Anything. Our poverty in the 60s, the abortion rates, black men in prison, anything. Any problem the black community has, it's the black women's fault. It was jarring, confusing, frustrating. Also, there was no room for conversation. There was no safety in our conversations. So I could not just say, hey, I'm so hurt about stuff that you're posting on Twitter. It's so painful. I was steady reading this shit every day. He was probably tweeting 30 to 50 tweets a day around essentially anti-blackness and misogyny and misogynoir. There was one time I decided to initiate a conversation because he posted something about black kids being abused. So I'm a black kid. I was a black kid who was abused by my father very significantly. I decided to bring it up to him just based on my experience of having lived it, of enduring sexual abuse by my father. And we were on the phone. He was still living separate. I remember saying something about how the abuse rates for black American women are so high, and that when you're abused as a child, especially sexually, it can be often very difficult for you to enter into healthy sexual connections when you're older because you don't have a sense of body autonomy. And it's very difficult to say no, because he was talking about, I think, black women being loose, unlike white women who are not loose, of course, as you all know. So I said, it's not really about race in this issue. Kids, no matter the gender, who have their body autonomy stolen from them are going to have a difficult time not being abused. Like, they are much more likely to be abused. And I remember when I said that, he's like,
get the fuck out of here.
It's like, what? Because it's just such a common knowledge kind of thing. I thought maybe he was joking. And I said, I've struggled with body autonomy. I let men do things to me, especially when I was a teenager, that I did not want to happen, and in fact hurt, because I didn't know I could say no. And sometimes it hurt, and I didn't say no because I had a lack of body autonomy. And he was like,
get the fuck out of here. You didn't know how to say no. What the fuck?
And he just was like really strongly going in on me. I started crying and I was like, listen, I'm trying to tell you, I have some experience with this. I've been through years and years of therapy. I've read a lot of books about this. I have some knowledge about the kind of things that abuse survivors go through. And I remember him cutting me off. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he cut me off and he basically said,
just stop. Just stop with the bullshit.
And it was such an inappropriate response to whatever I said that I think I just started crying. And then I said to him, the way that you're responding to me right now makes me feel like you're not a safe enough person for me to share my abuse stories with. And he said just like this,
good.
It was another one of those times I was in literal disbelief. Like, who is this person? I was like, I cannot believe I'm married to him. I was so hurt. And so we got off the phone quickly. At that point, I was starting to not want to even cry in front of him, because he got to the point where he would get mad at me if I was crying, whether it was legitimate to him or not. I got on his Twitter and he tweeted, females are parasites. I felt really confused. I felt very sad. I know that I cried for 2 or 3 hours. I couldn't sleep. I think it was when I was starting to realize I'm really married to him. I really am pregnant with this man's child. I really am in some ways sort of trapped. I don't have any money. I don't have a job. I have 2 other kids. I can't lose my housing. If I lose my housing, I'll lose custody of my 2 other kids. I don't have anywhere to go. I'm too afraid to talk to him about anything. It was like all these realizations were starting to roll in, and just seeing him tweet that really, really, really hurt me. A couple months after that, he started tweeting a lot more about MGTOW, which is this movement called Men Going Their Own Way, which, from what I understand, is a group of traumatized men who've never dealt with their pain, who've turned into abusive, tyrannical assholes, who want to basically live without women except for when they feel like fucking. They're just going to live their life without women. And he talked about how before he met me, he was just about to go into MGTOW, and how, when we first started, how I rescued him from going into the MGTOW movement and just swearing off women altogether, because women are so fucking horrible. And when he first told me that, I remember thinking like, oh, that's so sweet. He was about to swear off women, and I changed his mind. Like, he must really love me. Anyway, he started getting more and more involved with MGTOW. He was tweeting stuff about them. He was interacting with men about the MGTOW movement. And I think in like February or something of that year, 2016, he put on Facebook as a status update, these are his exact words. He said, if I weren't married, I'd go MGTOW. And when I saw that, I was just like, This is so humiliating. I am literally married and pregnant with his child and so in love with him, and he's putting a Facebook status about essentially wishing he weren't married to me so that he could go his own way without women. It was really hurtful. He also completely, thoroughly, emotionally pulled away from me. One time the fire alarm went off because I was burning something. I have always had like a very high startle reflex. My adrenaline was pumping when the fire alarm went off. Well, okay, the truth is I was burning something, but a big flame came up and I had to like douse it. It was smoking. The fire alarm went off. It was a bad sight. Okay, I was a little freaked out, and I went over to him and I like gave him a hug, and I was like, oh my god, my adrenaline is pumping. And he pulled away from me.
He was like, what are you doing?
And I was like, oh, I just want a hug, because kind of freaked out. Like I just caught the stove on fire. I had to put it out with a towel. The fire alarm is going off, and I was like, I'm just kind of freaked out. And he looked at me with like just disdain, and he was like,
what would you do if I weren't here?
And I was just like, babe, I don't know. You are here. Why is this such a big deal? I just want a hug. I just want comfort. There was just little things like that over and over and over again, where anything, literally anything, was met with some sort of humiliation, belittling, disrespect, or just all-out cruelty. It's very difficult to explain how so much of that becomes so debilitating, but especially when you're pregnant. So he was completely pulled away emotionally. Also, he constantly threatened to leave me. Constantly. We had an argument about something. I decided that I thought it would be helpful to write him an email, because I thought that way we wouldn't be fighting. I could say exactly what I wanted to say. I could edit it. I could just be really, really careful how I word things. I could make sure that he knows I'm not attacking him. So I sent him a pretty long email once we were going to end up seeing each other, because we were going to go to a Super Bowl party that night together with his family in Chicago. And I took like 4 hours on the email. He had done something that hurt me, and I wanted him to understand. When I bring up things that hurt me, I'm not trying to attack you. I really am just hurt, and I really like you to do things differently. He wrote me back like 1 or 2 sentences. Thanks for sharing how you feel. He got so angry about the email, he didn't come to the Super Bowl gathering. So I ended up going out to Chicago and hanging out with his family without him. I went back to his place that night, because he had still had his place in Indiana, his bachelor pad where he did God knows what with God knows who. I went back there that night. He was really cruel, very mean, very belittling, per his usual. And in the morning I was like, can we please talk about this email, because it's obviously affecting you? And he was like,
You know what? I read that email and I thought to myself, I don't even know if I can stay with this woman.
And I was just like, what? This woman? First of all, this woman? That's just who I am to you, a random woman? Just that language was so jarring. But I was also like, babe, we've been married for 6 months, not that long. If I haven't proven my love to you at this point, I don't think there's anything I can do. At that point, I had already bent myself into a pretzel trying to figure out how to help him see how committed and devoted I was to him. But I was also pregnant and dependent on him, completely, fully financially dependent on him, not intentionally. He did stuff like that so often. He threatened the relationship so often. I ended up sending him, a month or 2 from then, I sent him just an article about how difficult it is for people to feel safe in relationships when the other partner is always threatening the relationship. Meanwhile, I was always telling him, like, I will never leave. I'm not gonna leave. I have no interest in leaving. Let's just get through this stuff. Like, we have a baby coming. Let's just get through this. And he was always like,
you don't have to be here. I don't have to be here. I'm gonna leave.
And, just always doing that. The pattern that we got into was me begging him not to leave me. Please don't leave me. Please don't leave me. I love you so much. And all of that was hard. And in January of that year is when he started being really, really, really mean to me. It was just like the new year flipped over. It was like a switch, like a light switch went off, and I started being really pregnant, be 11 weeks pregnant, and very emotional. And I also had hyperemesis, and I was throwing up pretty bad. There were weekends I couldn't keep anything down, so it was just a hard time. And I was sad and worried about not having a job, and I really felt like I needed him. So I was asking more, hey, how's your job search going? And he was getting angrier and angrier. And so he told me he was going to write an Excel spreadsheet, and he was going to email me every day all the jobs. He had a really big immature attitude problem about it. His silence on that was very violent. It was very obvious to me he doesn't really care. And at the same time, I had a few friends telling me, like, Grace, why would he want to live with you? Like, he has a bachelor pad. He's alone 3 or 4 nights a week in a different state all by himself. He can play video games or do whatever to his heart's content. And I was like, yeah, that's true. But I thought that he wanted to marry me and wanted to be around me. It's okay if he wants to live like a bachelor, but he ain't a bachelor no more. But I was still defending him, but feeling very, very sad about it. There was a time I was just feeling super emotional and really sad, just thinking about the baby and I being alone and him still not being here. We were Skyping and I said to him, do you even want me and the baby? Because I felt like he wasn't doing anything to communicate that he wanted me in any way. And as a matter of fact, that's when I started to believe that he really truly regretted marrying me. He says he never felt that way, but his actions were screaming it. I said to him, do you even want me and the baby? I remember we were on Skype and he was like this when I asked, and he looked up at me and he was like,
are you stupid? Are you fucking stupid? What the fuck is wrong with you?
And went on with anger, and I was so jarred by that. Number one, because being called fucking stupid was something that I was called when I was a child by my verbally abusive brother. He knew that it was a set of words that were particularly a low blow for me to hear because of what I went through and endured. But as soon as he said that and the way he pointed his fingers and the way he was like looking at me so intensely, and when I started crying, he just went higher. He just went bigger, and he was yelling about all that he does for me and how he's supporting us, and he just went off. Because he was getting amped up even more, I was feeling such an intensity of pain that I went into the other room, balled up in a corner on the floor, and just cried for a minute. I didn't hang up on him, I just cried. I felt so violated by it because it was very rare that he got to that elevated level, but he had also never called me a bad name. It was the first bad name he'd ever called me. All the pain that I'd endured from him at that point was from all the things I've told y'all already. It was just manipulation or lies or gaslighting. But being called a name, especially that name, it was very hurtful. I went back into, I'm really sorry, I just was asking because you haven't mentioned anything about the job. And then he's like,
I told you why I had found a job.
He just was angry, and I was trying to de-escalate him. That was like really in the beginning. I didn't know how to de-escalate him at that point. I was really just learning. The only thing I knew how to do was apologize and just take all the blame. I'm sorry for asking that. I'm sorry for assuming. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for this. I'm sorry for that. Please don't hold it against me. Please don't be mad at me. I needed it to get to the honeymoon stage of the abuse cycle, which is where everything's okay again, because I had already started forming the addictiveness of trauma bonding, where my body was like literally physically peptide addicted to the cycles of abuse. I got him there where we made up. He did call me later and express that he felt bad, but it was so minimalistic considering the damage that had been done from that interaction. Then about a month or so after that, for about 3 or 4 months from February on, where he literally, and I'm not exaggerating, I'm not using hyperbole, he literally did not initiate a single touch, sexual or non-sexual, a single compliment, a single hug, cuddle, snuggle, anything. He did not initiate touching me for 4 months, and I kept track because I kept thinking maybe, he'll notice. I was way too scared to say anything at that point about anything at all, sexually or otherwise. But it was extremely painful, y'all. I didn't know what touch deprivation was, but I don't even have words for what that experience was like. It was one of the most painful aspects of all of the ways that he was abusive to me was the touch deprivation. But it wasn't just that, it was never pursuing it. Let me give you an image of how when we would go to bed at night, he would always face away from me, and I would either spoon him from the back just so we could be physically touching. If he happened to be sleeping on his back, I would lift up his arm and get like snuggle under his arm and then put his arm over me. Or if he happened to be facing me, I would literally physically put his arm over me. So sometimes if somebody puts your arm around them, you might just like go like that, but he never did. Like if I put his arm here, he was just like let it. Those little things, sometimes even now I hear myself and I'm like wanting to explain to y'all, I swear it's not just a little thing, but when you add them all up, all of these little things, you realize you're being devalued. Anyway, so something happened to me when I was pregnant But I have never had happen with that intensity. But I wanted to have so much sex when I was pregnant, y'all. It was like I became like a 16-year-old boy or something. Like I was it let's just say the pregnancy did something. It made sex so unbelievably enjoyable and I wanted it so often. And I had a husband who I would have to beg to do it with me once a week when he came home. And it was just so difficult. Like I would be on pins and needles waiting for him to get home because I was so horny and ready to go. And then like he would get home and just start playing video games and not say, "Hi honey, I'm home." No kiss, no hug, no touch. If I did not initiate any of that, none of that would happen. And then I would wait, just sit around and wait for when I could ask, like when is it appropriate for me to ask? When can I, I was like a freaking drug addict. When can I ask? When can I get it? And it just became so painful because he was sometimes like, I don't really want to. So anyway, but at some point we were on the phone one morning and I just said, do you find me attractive at all? Because I didn't want to ask the "why don't you want to have sex with me" question, but I was just like, dang, it would be nice for you to tell me I'm pretty or something, because I'm pregnant, I don't feel like myself, my body doesn't feel like myself, I'm like super horny all the time, I'm not getting anything. It's just, I'm discouraged. I didn't tell him any of that. He could have never handled that. But what I said was, do you find me attractive? And he was like,
well, I mean, you're pregnant.
And I was like, yeah, but do you find me attractive? And he was like,
no, I'm not as attracted to you while you're pregnant, nor should I be required to be. I'm just not. I mean, yeah, you're beautiful or whatever, of course, but no, I'm not going to be as attracted to you or want to have sex with you as much while you're pregnant.
And just the way he said it again was so cold. And I was so disappointed too, because I really thought this was like his one opportunity that maybe he could say something nice, just anything. And I called my best friend and I was just crying and crying and crying on the phone with her, and she was just like, "I'm so sorry, Grace. Like, I know what it feels like to really desperately want to have sex with your husband and have them not be interested at all." And she was like, and for him to say that, like, that's so painful. She was like, even if he feels that way, he could have found a way to be more diplomatic about it. And I'm so sorry, like, that was so cruel. And that I thought, yeah, he is cruel. And she said, "Grace, I'm so sorry to say this to you." She's like, "But your husband is so mean." She's like, "He's so mean. Have you ever thought that?" And I was like, yeah, I'm just starting to think that. Yeah, he really is. I didn't see that before. It was like one of those times where I just realized I married somebody so quickly I didn't even get to see all of the ways that he was. And him being really, really, really mean was one of the ways that I didn't notice. One of the huge breakdowns of our marriage. In May, this is the event that kicked off months and months and months and months of such needless abuse. It's ridiculous. On May 28th, I was at home. It was a Saturday. He told me he was going to the gym. He went back to his man cave. Probably about like 3 hours in, I called him because he usually would text me and be like, "Hey, I'm leaving the gym." I called him. It just rang. So then I was like, that's really weird. He always answers his phone. So I called him back and it went straight to voicemail. So then I texted him. It didn't go through. So I was like, his phone is off? I was like, is his phone off? I don't know what's going on. So then I turned on his locator because we had location services set up and that was off. So I was like, that's really, really weird. I sent him like a bunch of texts and I was starting to get worried. And I really honestly wasn't worried he was with someone. I was just worried because he never did this kind of stuff. His phone was never off. It never sent me to voicemail. A few hours later, after I had texted him and I texted his sister. I was like, "Hey, could you do me a favor? Can you text your brother and see if he responds? Because he's not responding to my text and I'm wondering if he's dead, on the side of the road with someone, like what's happening." So she texted him and he texted her back immediately. So I texted him and I was like, "Oh, you're just gonna ignore me?" And he just didn't respond. And I sent him like several more texts and he just didn't respond. Finally, he called me and he was like, "Oh, hey, what's up?" And I'm like, "I've been calling you for 2 or 3 hours. What's been going on?" And then he told me that he lost his phone at the gym and that he had to go back. He didn't realize and the battery died. And I was like, why did it go to voicemail the second time? The first time I called, it rang and rang, but the second time it went to voicemail. He's like, "Well, I don't know." And I'm like, well, if it went to voicemail, somebody would have had to send it to voicemail. Why was it on before but then off? I was just trying to figure out. And he was just like,
"Oh, I don't know. Maybe some guy at the gym saw it and just hit decline or something."
And I was like, somebody saw your phone at the gym and hit decline on a call? Like, that's kind of unlikely. He just was like, "Yeah, I don't know. It's not a big deal." And I'm like, why did you respond to your sister, but not to me? He was like, "Oh, I just wanted to wait till I could call you. I just want to see what she wanted." He was giving me things that could have foreseeably been accurate, but regardless, I told my friend, and she was like, just keep an eye on that. And I'm like, yeah, that was an interesting thing. It kind of got my antennas up, but it didn't really register too much as something to be afraid of. It's just something I kept in my mind until the day before I had our daughter. I went to the bank to put me on the bank account. So we're sitting in the bank, and whoever was dealing with us, can you get some random piece of information? And he opened up his phone. It was in the middle of a text from a name that I tried to glance at really quick, but all I could see was EA at the end, so I just assumed it was like Andrea or something like that. Saw it, I just felt sick to my stomach. That's all I can say. I didn't have anything else to go on, just that I felt sick to my stomach. I wanted so bad to ask him, like, show me your text messages. I want to see who that last thread is from, like before he got a chance to delete it. Every time he came home, I checked his text because he gave me thumbprint recognition access like pretty early on as a way to say, hey, you can trust me. You can always get in my phone. You can always look at anything you want. Sometimes when he would fall asleep, I would just look at it and there was never anything. There was nothing. Never anything at all. So I wanted to ask him, like, let me just look at your phone real quick. I want to see who this text thread is from because he had just gotten into town. I realized later what he was doing is he would only text this woman whose name did end in EA, by the way. It wasn't Andrea, but it did end in EA. I realized later from looking at phone records that they would text only on the days where he was back in Indiana. He wouldn't text with her when he was in Michigan. And basically what he would do is before he got out of the car, he would delete the thread and then come home, be with me for 3 days. He wouldn't contact her at all in that time. And then he would resume texting her, come home and delete the thread. But that day he had met me at the bank and I don't think he did his usual schedule of deleting the thread from her. So I saw that and it was in the back of my mind. Before I went to bed the night Revy was born, of course I wanted to have sex because I was like horn dog of the world because of pregnancy. I don't know what the hell happened to me in that pregnancy, but my friend Tabitha had given me this really pretty nightie. It's like a black stretchy maternity lingerie. And I really, really, really was hoping for something like some sort of like, wow, or you look great, babe, or just something. I just wanted something. So when I came out, he looked at me and he started laughing. I was so hurt. I'm thankful that I'm over it right now. But it took me like a few years to be able to talk about that without crying. And he just laughed. And I was just like, like I tried to pretend like, yeah, isn't it funny me trying to be sexy while I'm this pregnant? But it really hurt. So I did end up getting him to have sex with me. But he started choking me. He was choking me during sex in a way that was way too hard. I couldn't say anything. Couldn't breathe. I was extremely pregnant and I started hitting him, like to let him know, you're killing me. It was jarring for me to be that pregnant and have to let him know you're not paying enough attention to even know that you're literally choking me to death. It was just painful that he didn't recognize that. Just to give a little context here, all of those things happened in the same day. The day we went to the bank to get me put on the account, and then I saw the text that made me sick to my stomach. I forgot to mention there were some other things that he did that kind of set me off about that. And then the night that I wore the nightie and he didn't want to have sex with me, but we did it, and then he choked me. And then what I'm about to describe here, and then I went into labor and I had the baby by 7:47 in the morning. The night before I had the baby, out of the clear blue sky, his computer password popped up in my head. I was having some mild contractions. His computer password just popped in my head. He's sound asleep. I should just go check. I get on his computer. I first open his text messages because it's an Apple, so the iMessages are on the computer. And I see a text message from May 28th that says, you're hanging out with me tonight, right? And I'm like, I think that's the day that he says he lost his phone at the gym. So I like get my phone and I'm looking back to text messages and I'm like frantically looking back at things that would give me a clue. And then I realized it was the date that he says he lost his phone at the gym. I did like a reverse number search on Google and found the woman's name, and then I looked up her name and found out she works at where he works at, and then she works in literally the same office as him. And so I'm like, oh, he was with her. So then I go onto his email. I was starting to get angry and I also started having contractions, and that's when I found out about the match emails. And I see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails from Match from the time we met until well into our marriage. Like, actually, they had just stopped. That was July, and they had just stopped in March of that year. Every single one of them opened, several starred, and in the important folder, I started to panic, and I thought, I don't know who he is at all. And then I saw an email. Then I went to his sent folders to see if he had sent any emails to those people or any emails whatsoever. And I saw some flirty emails between him and one of his coworkers from when we first started dating. But then I saw something that was jarring to me. It was when I saw the email between him and one of the other women he met on eHarmony after we had talked about getting married, after we talked about having a baby, after we had committed ourselves to one another essentially, and he was just randomly starting a new eHarmony relationship, and I could see that it didn't go anywhere. It was like 3 to 4 weeks of emailing, and when I saw that email, and then I saw the flirtatious emails with the coworker, and then I saw the match emails, and then I saw that he had been out with another woman that night, and I didn't know what happened, I literally started panicking and my body started convulsing, and then I started having huge major contractions, and then I went to the bathroom and I was bleeding like bright red blood. And so I called the doctor and I was like, "Hi, I think I'm in labor." "Yeah, okay, I'm coming in." And then she called me back a few minutes later. She's like, "Are you sure you're in labor?" And I was like, "I'm bleeding and I'm having horrible contractions 2 minutes and 15 seconds apart." And I just like didn't have any emotional or mental energy to give to labor, because I was like, I don't even know who I'm married to. Like, I was just like, I don't know him at all. And I just went in the room and woke him up and I was like, "It's time." And he just got his stuff, and I was super quiet the whole way there. He never asked me what was wrong. He never said, "Are you in pain?" He just didn't say anything. Like, he was just vibing off of my mood, and I was like really in this like withdrawn mood. And then when we got to the hospital, the tech told me to put the gown on. I went in the bathroom by myself and I just lost it, and I was just like, he's been cheating on me. I was so devastated, y'all. And I was like, and I'm about to have a baby. I don't even know how to do this and have a baby while I'm processing all of this horrible information. I did call my friend. I was just like, I can't do this, Jean. And I told her everything, and she was just like, oh my God. And just pretend. Don't tell him you know anything. Don't bring it up till after you get home. Like, this is not the time. It's not the time. Like, right now you have to have the baby. And I remember just being in the room with the nurse, and I just kept crying, and she was like, are you sure? Do you need, you sure your pain is manageable? And I just couldn't tell her, so I was just like, it's manageable. I just kept crying. And then while the doctor was giving me the epidural, they had him sit in front of me. They raised up the bed really high, and they had me put my feet on his knees, and he was holding my hands. And so I was like looking down at him, and he was looking at me, and the doctor was giving me the epidural, and I was just crying and crying. He was like, does it hurt? And I was like, no. And everybody was like, well, why are you crying? And I just wanted to say, I don't know him. I don't know who he is at all. He's not who he said he was, is what I was thinking. When I was filming this, I was a little disoriented, as you can see, so I just started randomly telling another story, another backstory about what else I was bringing into the labor room when I was trying to have the baby, and he was looking at me, and he was being very tender and loving and kind, which is what made it all the more confusing, because I thought, you're a liar, this is all pretend. And then I have all of these thoughts in my head. So this is a little bit of the backstory of what else was happening while I was in labor. And one of the most troubling times of that time, besides all these other things that were happening, I think was in April of that year. I went to one of my favorite events that I love going to every other year, the Festival of Faith and Writing. And I was just starting to try to edge my way back into the social justice community and the writing community and the collision of arts and justice writing and all the things I'm very passionate about, that he also told me that he was very passionate about. I was at the conference and I tweeted something about, some quotes from Drew Hart and Lisa and Austin Channing Brown and all these people I really respect about the need for social justice. Later that night when I got home, not to him, like home from the conference that night, he tweeted something like, social justice warriors are not good people, and what you're doing is really not needed, and this is really a bad thing that you're doing. You should not be doing this. I couldn't help but think that it was a response to me and what I had just tweeted, so I called him and I was telling him about everything I heard, and I was so excited, and he had not come out of the closet yet that he was deciding to be conservative Republican, so he wasn't really saying anything, but he just said at the end of the conversation, like, yeah, I don't really believe any of that anymore. And I was just like, what? It just felt like a nice dab, because again, this is something that he had agreed with me in the beginning, and now all of a sudden, without warning, he was not just neutral about things I was passionate about, he was anti things I was passionate about. And he went on to proceed from there to go on daily Twitter storms about about anything and everything about who I am and what I stand for and what I'm passionate about in extremely violent and bullying ways. All of that was kind of in the back of my mind when I was sitting there. It was just this very vulnerable moment where I'm in a gown, naked, and he's sitting below me and he's holding my hands and he's just looking up at me and I'm crying. And I was just looking at him and I was just like, it was just devastating. I did end up having the baby without saying anything to him. It was incredibly difficult. It was one of the hardest things I think I've ever done. As a result, the labor was very easy and quick because honestly, I could not even think about that pain. I didn't even have time to think about that pain. All I could think was, my husband's cheating on me. I don't know who my husband is. He's cheating on me. He's been unmatched. He's probably been cheating on me this whole time. No wonder this, no wonder that, no wonder this, no wonder that. Like, I could not stop thinking about it. Like, robbed all of the joy and energy from having my third and final baby and my first daughter. It was just so traumatizing. So finally, in the end of the hospital stay, we had a few moments alone and I just said, I know what you did on May 28th. I know where you were. I know what happened. And he's like, what? You know, he looked really nervous and I was like, I know you were with so-and-so, and I said her name and he was like,
no, I wasn't.
And I was like, you can just stop. I saw the text the night before I had the baby. And he was like, no, I didn't. And he was still denying and still lying. And I was just like, I saw the text where you said you're hanging out with me tonight, right? So he found a way to lie about it and was so convincing, y'all, that I actually believed him. And so then I was like, okay, well, let's talk about the match emails. And he went into a whole giant, big web of lies about it, so that I believed him about that. Then I was like, well, let's talk about the girl from eHarmony that you reached out to way after we decided to get married and have a baby. And then he went into like a whole web of lies and excuses about that. So that by the time I called my friend back and told her, I was actually feeling fine about it all. I'm like, yeah, it was all just a misunderstanding. And it was just so hurtful because she and another one of my friends, when they heard me before I had the baby, was really alarmed, and they were talking about cashing out part of their retirements and helping me to move out, and realizing like I was with a snake, and they were like gonna help me move. And so when I called her back and was like, everything's fine, it just turns out all these things were misunderstandings. Like, y'all, he had convinced me. I'm not an unintelligent person, but he had convinced me that they were all lies and misunderstandings, and really comforted me and he made it right by lying. It damaged my friendships because she was like, we were so fucking mad at you, like we were about to cash out some of our retirement to help you move out, and now all of a sudden everything's okay. And at the time I just was like, I'm so sorry. So it's like I had to apologize to them, and I had to apologize to him for misunderstanding all the ways that I thought he was cheating on me. It made me become more and more isolated. Okay, so after the hospital, after he told me that everything was all just a big misunderstanding at the hospital, things just kept coming up. I really wanted to really know the truth. My brain was not letting me just relax and believe him. I decided to invest $50 that I really didn't have into a service that would let you see deleted texts. And I asked him, like, I got this service, can we plug your phone into it? I would really like to see your text from that day if you're telling me nothing happened. And probably by the time I did this, I had asked him probably 3 times, are you lying to me about that night? I see these texts about you hanging out with someone that night. Like, will you please just tell me the truth? I'm really begging you. Every time.
No, Grace, nothing happened. I'm telling you the truth. I wasn't with anyone. I just lost my phone.
He was committed to that lie, y'all. Ooh, he was committed. He was like,
you can even check the phone records. Just quit giving me shit about it.
Blah, blah, blah. And I hadn't checked the phone records yet at that point because, I don't know. I really have no idea. I had given him an opportunity. Again, like, we sat there and I was just like, please just tell me the truth. I'm willing to work with you with whatever happened. I just want you to stop lying to me because my brain is going nuts. And he was like, no. So I thought, well, maybe I should just check the bank records. I logged into our account and he was driving back to Indiana to go to work. And I saw that he had bought a movie ticket for May 28th. So I called him. At that point, I was pissed because I had asked him a good 5 or 6 times. This had been months now. 3 months had went by that he was staying committed to this lie. So it was like, oh, so that's what you did? You was on a date with somebody, you took him to the fucking movies and blah, blah, blah. And I really was going off, which I never usually did. Never usually did. And he got so mad. And he was like, I don't even know what his excuse was. I don't remember what he said, but there was clearly a movie ticket that he purchased for that day when he said his phone was lost for that time, you know, in that same area. This was something that really hurt me. He said,
I hope that this fucking eats you alive. I just hope you sit around and wonder. I hope you can't sleep. I hope it eats you alive, not knowing what happened, who I was with.
don't even remember how that conversation ended. I remember now. It ended with him turning it back around on me and basically telling me how evil I was for daring to look up our bank records and check up on him and not trust him. And I ended up tearfully apologizing, begging his forgiveness, and telling him that moving forward, I would trust him. I wish I could tell y'all that after so many times of him saying so many cruel things that it didn't hurt, or that I was just like, I'm leaving, but I just felt confused because after that, he would go back to, I'm sorry, I love you. He was never really great at the makeup phase, but just enough to keep me feeling like, all right. But after he said, I hope it fucking eats you alive, I did feel pummeled. It was one of the first times that I can describe feeling that verbal abuse felt physical, that my body was starting to not know the difference between him saying incredibly intolerably cruel things to me and him just fucking punching me. Like, once I realized I was being verbally abused and I looked back, I started to wish he had just hit me. All the times he said, the intensity of the cruel things he said, because they looped in my brain for years and years and years and continued to hurt me. Whereas I knew, like, if he just had punched me those times and not said that shit, that my body would have healed in a week or two. The trauma of hearing the cruelty of someone's word that's cruelty set up just for you. Finally, I paid for the service. He agreed to let me plug his phone into this thing that would pull up deleted text. We had an hour and a half, so I was like, well, let's do this now before the boys get home. So I plugged his phone in. It ended up taking a long time. My heart was racing. We were sitting there on the couch. It was like literally like 45, 50 minutes, maybe an hour for it to pull up all of the texts, because it also pulled up like all the phone numbers he'd ever had on his phone, all the texts he'd ever sent. And then it finally got to the point where you could sort by number, so I put her number in, and it started pulling up hundreds and hundreds of texts on my computer. It wasn't facing him, so it was only facing me so I could see it. So he didn't know what I was looking. But then I started seeing the texts come through from her phone number, and I wasn't saying anything to him. I was just reading them, and he saw me getting upset. I was starting to go like I was starting to hyperventilate a little bit. And then finally I saw something that came through where it said, you're meeting me at, you know, whatever it was. We meet at Bloomington 10 at 7:45, right? Or something like that. So I just read it out loud and I was like, so it says here that you got this message from this woman. You guys are meeting at Bloomington 10. So I was like, so you did go to the movies with her? And he was like,
yeah. Yep.
And so I really thought he was going to, at that point, with the evidence right in front of us, just be nice and say, I'm so sorry I lied to you. I'm so sorry I've been lying to you for 4 months about this. I'm so sorry that you've been going through torture about this. I'm so sorry that I have been putting you through hell. I'm so sorry that I told you that I hope you fucking rot with mental anguish trying to figure out where I was that night. But he said,
man, this is over. It's over. It's over.
I didn't even have a chance to respond. I literally didn't have a chance to say anything. And I was like, what? You're breaking up with me? I was so confused. And he was like,
yes, I'm breaking up. This marriage is terrible, and sex has always been a chore. And
I cut him off, and I was like, wait, what? Sex was always a chore? I mean, it was just like so much. It was so much. Like he was having me take in so much information back to back to back. Like, yes, I was with this woman, but I didn't even get to ask questions like, where did y'all go after the movies? Did you go to dinner? Did you sleep with her? I didn't get to ask that. Then he said the marriage is over. I didn't even barely get to process that he said that without, like, you know, him then launching into sex always being a chore. And it was just like, what the hell is happening? And I realized the time, and I was getting late for picking up my sons, and so I was just like, damn, I gotta go. So I was getting my shoes on, and I was just like, this is so typical of you. Like, it was all I could say. I was like, this is what you always do. You just leave women. You just have women fall in love with you and you leave them. This is your pattern. I didn't really know that fully, which really is his pattern, but I didn't really know that fully. But I was like, yeah, this is what I expected you would do. I knew you would do this to me because this is just who you are. It was like all I could get out. That's all I could get out. Came back, I picked up the boys and I came back, and we waited till they got in bed, till they fell asleep. And I came back and I decided to de-escalate him, and I was just like, I remember starting with, I'm not letting you leave me. We only just got married. It hasn't even been and we have a little baby. She's so precious and she's so... He told me at that point that all they did was go to the movies, that they hugged at the end, that he didn't pay for her, that they didn't go to dinner, that he didn't sleep with her. So I was just like, well, if that's all that happened, then I forgive you and I'm gonna stay with you because I believe in marriage. And And then the text messages, this little app that I had bought, it saved a file of all of his, I didn't know this at the time, it saved a PDF of all of his text messages on my computer. I realized this like 3 or 4 weeks after that night. Pulled it up and saw text messages with other women from earlier. From another woman at his job. I'm getting so triggered just talking about this. So I saw these other text messages, and I remember calling him about one of them, and I was like, there was another woman that you were flirting with and spending the night with. That day I wasn't so emotional, I just was resigned. You're a liar, you're a cheater, and you treat me like absolute shit, like worse than shit. You treat me worse than you would treat an animal in your life. At least an animal gets love. That was actually something I thought about before, because we had a guinea pig at the time, and when he came home, he like loved to touch and hold the guinea pig and play with the guinea pig, but he never touched me, never wanted to touch me, so like literally not at all. So I started thinking, he treats the fucking guinea pig better than he treats me. And I was resigned to it at that point. I was just like, this is my life. When I called, I just had this deadpan voice, and I was like, yeah, that app kept a PDF of all the texts you've ever sent since you got that phone, and I saw the text about you spending the night with this other woman from the call center. He was just like, yeah. And he was like,
I'm leaving this job. I quit. I can't do this anymore. I can't do any of this anymore. I'm done with all of this. I'm done with you. I'm done with all of it.
that was one of the first times I didn't beg him, and I was like, that's fine. We did end up getting back together. He did get a transfer, so he was able to finally move in with us when the baby was, when she was about 4 months old. He moved in with us. He was saying that he was going to do better, that he wasn't going to be as mean to me. I was really excited when he moved in. I remember being so happy, like, oh my god, we're going to get to see each other every day. We're going to have sex much more often. He's promising he's going to touch me again and compliment me every now and then, tell me he loves me and actually be nice to me and not lie to me and not focus on other women and not cheat on me. So I remember being really happy, like really fucking excited when he moved in. And we had 2 good months. There were 2 months where I was feeling really happy. And then on New Year's Eve, we were home. We were just home with the baby. She went to bed, and we decided basically drink. So we had wine and stuff. We watched a movie, and in the movie, the love movie, it like triggered me or something. And so I started talking to him about stuff. I was still in a lot of pain a lot of the time about a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff he said to me, all the abusive stuff he had said that year was constantly looping in my head. So I was still in a lot of pain, and I was still always wondering if he was cheating and when he was cheating and how he was cheating, because of the match emails and because of the woman in the beginning and because of the other woman he spent the night with and the ex and the movie date, the lies about that. And it was just very obvious to me that he was never honest with me. So I knew I still couldn't trust him, so there was still a lot of pain. But I brought some things up on New Year's Eve, and he got really, really, really angry. And it got to the point where I got up and I was standing in front of him. He was sitting on the couch and I was yelling. He stood up and screamed at me at the top of his lungs, the loudest I have ever heard him speak ever. And he was like,
do you think I give a fuck about you?
And he was screaming in my face, and I was scared, and I started running back to our room, because we lived in like a place with like a really long hallway. So I was like running back through this long hallway. He was like, don't you walk away from me. We're hearing that, and I tried to shut the door, and he pushed the door and it banged into me, and he got in front of me again, and he was screaming at me. And I was thinking at that point, I'm not sure what's gonna happen. I don't know if he's gonna strangle me to death. I don't know if he's gonna beat me to death. I don't know if he's gonna yell. I don't know if he's gonna leave. But it was the first time that I was like, Grace, you've got to go. You have to leave. That night, I think I realized, why would you stay in a marriage with, after all you've endured, with a man who would scream and put his fingers in your face and ask you, do you think I give a fuck about you? There is nothing more honest than that. He had his moment of honesty, and that was it. He does not give a fuck about you. That is the truth right there. It was like that moment where it was like, you have to trust that this is the truth. This is the truth, that he does not give a fuck about you. And around that time, I was starting to Google things about my husband yelling at me, things my husband would say. Is my husband emotionally abusing me? Should I leave my husband? How to get my husband to have sex with? How to get my husband to compliment me? Does my husband love me anymore? does my husband love me when he yells at me all the time? I just was confused. I was so confused. I felt constantly disrespected, maligned, scared, discarded. And then on January 11th, we got into a really, really big fight. So this is 2017 now. He started stonewalling me. That was like the first time I think he started the stonewalling aspect of the abuse, which is when he would just stop talking to me altogether. And he wouldn't talk to me for days and days. And it hurt me so much. Everything in me, y'all, everything in me longed for reconciliation. I would do anything. Like if he said, get on your knees and suck my dick for an hour and then I'll be okay, I would have done that. I would have done anything to get the feeling of reconciliation. I needed to have that, okay, I'm sorry, we're okay now, right, we're okay kind of feeling. And that's when I started reading about Stockholm Syndrome, when I started researching like what's going on, why do I feel this way, why do I feel panicked, anxiety after we fight. He had me believing we were just in a hard marriage, that we just fought a lot because we couldn't get along. No, that's not what it was. It was an abusive marriage, but I didn't know that yet. So I started reading about Stockholm Syndrome and I realized that's what I have. I have Stockholm Syndrome. And then I started reading like, well, if I have Stockholm Syndrome, what's causing that? And that's when I came upon things about being verbally abused. And that's when I came upon Patricia Evans' book about the verbally abusive marriage. And when I read that book, I really can't describe, well, first of all, I realized I am in a severely toxic, verbally abusive marriage. My husband is an abuser. He is undeniably a severe verbal abuser. There's levels to it in the book. There's a mild, moderate, and severe, and he was doing everything in the list. And every symptom that it talks about you might have, I had. When I realized that, I felt like someone took like a pile of boulders and poured it over me. I felt like I was being stoned to death. I really can't describe what it did to me once I realized that that's what had been happening to me for all that time. It was just horrible. I think I'm gonna stop here because I'm really getting triggered. I'm thoroughly triggered and I need some space. So I will come back and I think I'm just probably going to make a part 2 to part 3. I'm going to split up the abuse phase because there's still 2 more years left and I don't think I could possibly get through 2 years right now. I'm just too overwhelmed. So thank you so much for watching. Please like this video. Please subscribe. Please share this with someone who you think might benefit from it. If you have a friend who you think might be going through verbal abuse especially, please share this with them. Watching other people's stories was very, very helpful for me. And having been through severe verbal abuse and have so many people not understand it, I am very, very, very committed now to sharing more and more my story of verbal abuse, but more specifics than I have even here because of how important it was for me to read other people's stories. So please share this widely and leave me a comment about something that made sense to you or was meaningful to you. It's meaningful for me making these videos to have people comment, especially when they relate. I really appreciate it. So thank you so much for watching and I'll see you guys for part 3 or part 4 or however I finish up this series, but I'm gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much for watching. Bye. Hey, it's me again, Present Grace. And I just wanted to add, as if this wasn't long enough, how very deeply troubling all of this was. I sometimes think that gets lost when I'm sharing the story because I seem like I'm happy now, or because I use laughter to cope. But that time when the abuse started in January of 2016 through the entire year was one of the most traumatizing, tragic, awful, confusing, most horrible time of my entire life. I've never experienced anything harder than what I was going through in that time. And I'm just looking back at this video and I'm like, did I adequately show that? I'm not even sure. I think I probably cried every single day of the entire year. 2016 was awful. And I don't know if I quite captured that. It's really hard. It's really, really hard to watch this and feel like I want to tell y'all all of the stories and all of the things that happened because it was so much more than I was able to capture. There were so many more instances of abuse and the manipulation aspect and how much lying was happening. But I'm just going to try to let good enough be and hope y'all get the point. And of course, I'm available for questions. You can always email me at outheretryingtosurvive@gmail.com. Thank you again for watching, and I appreciate your support. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment.